Welcome everyone to another episode of Exploring Concept Art with me, your host, Jason Etienne. So this is a project that I'm currently working on with students entitled Ice World. So it's basically revolving around creating an environment, creating a character, and creating an artifact, or something that could potentially be turned into, like, a static mesh, like a prop. So starting off really from the basics, which is reference. So I'm going to do this as a kind of real-time thing, maybe sort of 5 to 10 minutes. We'll see how we get on, and it's really just a quick walkthrough of how you start, or how you would start a project like this. So there's lots that you could cover with this, but the first port of call is going to be looking at environments. If it's an ice world, then it's going to be something Arctic. So you do need to be looking at reference, looking at colors. You can be using some of these for your color palette. Okay, so looking at colors, looking at potential habitats as well. So looking at all these are like kind of stations, I guess, for geologists, people, looking at weather patterns, drilling down beneath the ice to see if they can find records of, looking at the kind of, what is that thing they do where they're going to drill down and they look at the ice, and they're able to kind of date, when the ice was, when it occurred, but also what was in the air, what was in the atmosphere. They can kind of do all this amazing stuff now. So you have these stations sort of set up, but also, stations where where they did fishing and and unfortunately whaling, but all these kind of places that exist. But so scientific fishing, things like that. So you want to be looking at certainly looking at the environments. It's looking at all this stuff, looking at potential habitats. This is all good material, all of it. What kind of humans would be living there? Again, this is just scratching the surface. Life forms, what kind of animals would be living there? And again, though, these are just a basis to start off with. You can veer off from this, but these are just the kind of basics. Particularly if it's like, obviously I'm talking in the realms of fantasy and sci-fi. Presuming that you want to do a project that's kind of in that kind of realm, video games, or indeed film, but with video games it's going to be something fantastical. So life forms, humans, and environment. Looking at all this stuff. So really what I'm going to be doing in this short time is really just taking you through my process. So through this project, and with my current students, what I'm going to be encouraging them to do, which is to look at stuff like this. Also look at game reference, look at film reference, look at illustrations, literature, all this kind of stuff. And documentaries as well. That's another thing. Look at the BBC do amazing Blue Planet documentaries and things like that. So again, looking at all that stuff, absorbing it, trying to avoid copying other artists' work. Be inspired by other artists' work, but try and avoid looking at all of that sort of generic concept art, sci-fi, and then using that as a reference. You don't want to be derivative. You want to be looking at, coming to your own conclusions, as it were. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sort of cut one of these out and just think about what, or maybe one or two, and just thinking like, this is kind of how I'd start. Yep, this is how I'd start. So I might even have a look at this. This is quite interesting. I'm just going to paste that in there. Now I'm just using this really for color palette and, you know, look at some of the values and things like that. I'm just going to go back again. Quite like this one down here as well. Okay, so there's just a few I'm going to choose. Here's the first one. Second one's here. Okay. And if you can't see that, it's basically like all kind of broken down, abandoned. These are like, look like crates or something, but I quite like the idea that, you know, it could be like part of a civilization that's kind of submerged, or a city or something or other. And I quite like the angular kind of nature of these. And also I quite like these as well. There's these structures. I'm not entirely sure what they are. I just like the form. They're obviously containers of some description. Again, I don't quite know what, you know, what they've been used for. So I'm going to just kind of group these together, and then what you can do is you can with your eyedropper, you can, if you want to start working in color, I mean, you could just stick with black and white for the time being, and I do encourage you to do that, but if you want to kind of sample some of this and think, okay, well, I'm going to just use some of this as a kind of color palette. Yeah, lots of these, you know, some lovely kind of turquoise colors in there. And some of this stuff for the sea as well. Put some of that in there. You can see there they got, so you get various kind of shades, various different colours in there, and even stuff like that. So you keep going. You sort of build up a little bit of a colour palette. And again, I might just sample some of that. You could label them if you want to. You know, you call that, you know, if it helps, you know, just so you've got some kind of, so you can call that sky. This could be, you know, the iceberg, or just ice. You know, a lot of this we'll just put as ice. Yep. And so yeah, some of these other structures as well. So I'll move that down, make these separate. So I'll cut that away. I'll just put it underneath, just so everything's clearly delineated. Yeah. Just collapse that down. So again, so these could be colours for the structure. Yeah, and particularly these kind of colours, which are kind of, it's kind of rust. I'm not sure if it's like, it's not really galvanized. It looks like rust. It looks like it's oxidized. So again, just choosing some of these tones here, and this will all come in handy when you're, you know, when you're sort of creating your environment. Again, I'm just looking at that kind of bit of tubing there. So just picking bits and bobs, and again, so all of this, like this could be, you know, these could be colours for, tell you what, let's just do this. I keep drawing freehand here, but let's try and make this a bit neater. And we'll call this structure. Okay. And let's make that a bit neater, because that at the moment is looking a bit like chicken scrawls, and we don't want that. So let's get this looking a bit neater as well. Just so this is just purely just so you can read my handwriting. Call this this will be sky and ice. Okay, just so kind of clear where we are. All right, so then you'd sort of start thinking about, okay, so start thinking about an environment. Now I'm assuming I have done a tutorial on perspective, so I'm assuming that if you don't know much about perspective, you can look at one of my other videos where I just sort of touch on drawing in perspective. But you could just, you know, start playing around with ideas about you know, creating an environment. So, you know, starting off with something like a horizon line with a vanishing point, and then kind of having some lines coming out. So at the moment it's just keeping things fairly kind of loose. Yeah. Okay, like just like 1 point perspective, that kind of thing. And I'm just really doing this as a kind of I wanted to kind of create like a sort of platform. Imagine it, this is like I'm thinking like something like Unreal Engine, yeah, where you'd start off with, you know, this kind of slab as the kind of base, and you can kind of build up from there, sort of thing. So imagine like this was kind of like a cutout from like the environment, so you kind of got this chunk, maybe even have it a little bit thicker. This helps, right, doing stuff like this where you're kind of working in 3D, well 2D, but you know, as 3D, is just to try and give you a sense of what that three-dimensional world might look like. You know, when it comes to working in Maya and things like that, just how things are going to work. So, you know, you could start kind of just thinking, okay, well, this is just part of an environment, and thinking, okay, well, going back to our reference, yeah. Okay, so it could be something where it's kind of shards, these kind of shards are in this environment. And again, you can do it in perspective, so that kind of scale, right? So these are kind of near the foreground, and then you could have some in the kind of mid-ground, and then some in the background. Yeah, so you're getting a sort of sense of scale. And maybe it drops down, maybe, you know, it's not just on the surface, yeah, maybe it goes, you know, maybe it's like a crevice or something. So you could even think about, okay, well, maybe this is, you know, do a kind of tube almost. I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of just making this up as I'm going along, but something where you might have an environment where maybe it's like a frozen waterfall that kind of drops down. So imagine that cutting through that now. I could even just move that, you know, just move that out, as it were. So imagine I've just kind of cut through. Imagine this like as a bit of styrofoam or something, whatever. I've cut through that, so we're seeing like a cross section almost. Yeah. And you're kind of seeing this, yeah. So it's like those diagrams you get in books, you know, where you're looking at, you know, a cross section of, say, a volcano or something like that, and then you see the volcano, and you see where the lava kind of comes up, you know, from the magma and all that. Anyway, so this is really I'm not going to go into any detail in this. It's just really just trying to get a sense of what this world might look like. Like I say, this could be potentially some kind of waterfall. This could be, in a sense, if you're going to create an environment, this could be the central theme. You know, maybe the people, whether it's like scientists or tribes, whatever, can maybe live high up, you know, either at ground level or high up in these shards, right? because there are predators. You've got these humanoid characters, but there are predators. Maybe they've got some kind of system set up where it's all, they've got bridges or structures, in between, and maybe entire villages set up on these, a bit like was it like the Ewoks in Return of the Jedi, where all the kind of the villages are sort of set high up in the trees. Perhaps it could be something like that, and maybe it's for practical purposes. Again, it's just something to think about in terms of when you're doing your designs about, okay, what would the predators be? Could it be environmental? Could it be that occasionally there's floods and so they don't get wiped out, they're on higher ground? Who knows, right? So you're just starting to think about what these environments could look like, and what the inhabitants, how they live, and all that kind of stuff. So again, this is really, this is purely just thumbnails, me just thinking it through. But again, the purpose of this tutorial is really just to sort of take you through my process, how I'd go around doing designs for, a game, or indeed, if it was for a film, for like doing, creating a 3D environment, which would then be put in post. They do shoot all the actors on green screen, and then all this stuff would kind of be put in there. So you can apply this to any of that. So you're thinking about the environment and potentially what could be going in that environment, colors, and then this relates back to reference. So I'm just working backwards there. Thumbnails. So again, okay. It's alright. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to talk and write at the same time. So so that process. You don't just start leaping into just doing. Oh, I've seen this concept art and I want to do something like that. It's like, as artists, designers, you need to have a bit more discipline than that. And I guarantee you, all the cool artists that you're looking at, all their work, they'll have been taught this way, they'll have developed this way. Yep. More or less, they'll have worked like that. So again, really just you sort of continue going on from there. So you just start thinking about, okay, so maybe that's what the environment could look like, and you might indeed kind of just do another kind of sketch of just kind of thinking. So this is kind of more like sort of top down. So I'm just leaving aside the kind of doing all the your perspective lines and all that, and I'm just kind of taking an educated guess now and just thinking, okay, well, that's kind of roughly what the environment's going to be. And then again, just keeping it as a thumbnail and just thinking, all right, so what about this idea of submersion? I quite like this idea that the environment, the environment and the village, or whatever it is, cities, kind of embedded within the snow. So it's all kind of overgrown, and that could be for a multitude of reasons. That could be that it really is just like an abandoned city, or it's something where beneath the surface. So let's say just do it like if that was a side view. Again, I'm just kind of thinking on my feet here. You'd have parts of structures kind of poking out. So it's a bit like they always say like the tip of the iceberg, right? So you could have parts of kind of structures, poking outside. So imagine this is a slice through where you're looking at, this is the, I mean, a person at this kind of, a person would be tiny at this scale, so I couldn't really sort of do it to scale. But let's say, there'd be a person would be just like a dot there, and these are all kind of structures coming out, and all this is kind of snow drifts and things like that. But then you could be thinking, beneath that crust, yeah, beneath that crust of ice, there's, you know, there are larger structures. Yeah, there's another world. So, I mean, here's another thing. It could be that it's actually underwater. It's sort of subaquatic. Yeah. So there's all these kind of, this kind of underworld, you know, Atlantis kind of environment that's kind of underneath. Yeah. You know, and then you've got the kind of, you've got the seabed, but you know, you've got an entire city kind of going on here. You know, looks kind of alien and whatever, you know. And again, this is just I'm not doing like, I'm not going to render these, you know. This is just really how I'd be thinking about playing things through in terms of what could what avenues I could be sort of taking with my designs, right? You know, and this is it's a good way to kind of work. This is sketching. Yeah, you're not just leaping into doing a painting. Okay, you've got to resist that stuff. You know, well, I want to do one painting, I want to make it look really nice, and it's like, no, you've got to seriously forget that kind of thinking. You know, as a designer, you've got to be thinking in terms of what's going to work, not putting too much time into that. So you can let ideas, let me rephrase that. Okay, so you can have ideas, and you can, if the ideas are bad, then you can let them die off. That's the best way I can describe it. So you're not creating an environment where, you know, you put a lot of time into it, but it's not quite worked out, or it's perhaps not even a good idea. You know, we all go through this, right? We have ideas which at the time you think are okay, but then you get part way through and you think, oh, I'm not entirely sure about this, you know, but I've invested all this time and I've just got to carry on, you know. And it's like, no, you don't want to be doing that. What you want to do is you want to have ideas, and if some of those ideas are great, you can kind of carry them on. This is after, you know, doing sketches like this. But then if there are ideas that are bad, you can let those die off. Yeah, let the bad ideas die off, and let the good ideas, the ideas that, you know, that arrive from sketches like this, you can then pursue those, develop those. Yeah. So again, just really all I'm doing at the moment is I'm not too fussed about creating beautiful kind of paintings. This is just really about fairly basic forms, what they might look like. These are just kind of doodles, really, just doodles. Again, I'm just kind of playing with this idea of this set within the ice, these kind of structures, almost kind of like a bit like castles or something, you know, but they'd be poking through like that, yeah, poking through the crust, but then beneath, yeah, there's a lot more going on. It could be that, you know, these beings are kind of subaquatic, so they're able to survive, you know, breathe underwater, but they have to come up, maybe, you know, for food or whatever the case might be. Sorry, 1 second. I'm recording this, and although it's November, I've got a wasp in my bedroom, so I'm just going to get rid of it. Okay, right, back to it. So so you get what I'm talking about there. Yeah, so you'd go from doing stuff like that, and then, as I've mentioned before, then you'd start thinking about, right, well, Now I'm thinking possibly continuing in black and white, but maybe if you wanted to kind of get a sense of the colours, you might start thinking about that. Thinking, okay, well, I wouldn't mind just kind of experimenting now, and experimenting with a sort of colour palette, and having a bit of a paint. And this is where you can kind of get your eyedropper, and you can think, okay, so I'm going to sort of copy that and just kind of really just touch on it. Really, you just might be having a think. So let's say, for example, I'm following through with this idea of this kind of submerged environment. You might start off, with a basic color, and with the structures, you could have maybe like those kind of colored structures coming through, but you'd want to sort of create the eyes first. Yeah, so excuse me. So something like, I could even just actually use the standard white there and have a think about, again, I'm just going to flip back here now. You could have a think about stuff like this. Again, keep going back to your reference. These bits of eyes there that are kind of broken away. In fact, did I copy that? I didn't, did I? So I'm just going to copy that a sec. So something like that. I'm just going to put that in there. I'll put it there. Again, so use that as reference. Now, one of the things you can do, if you like, is, let's make sure I've got the right thing. Yeah, there we go. Is you could use the lasso tool. This really nice kind of perspective that's kind of going on there with the eye. So you could maybe even do something like this, where you got part of the ice there, and then use the gradient tool. Like that. And maybe a bit over here. So you got these little kind of archipelagos, these small islands, kind of going off into the distance. Again, I'm not really going to go into massive detail. This is just really sketching, just sketching, trying out some ideas, what might work, what might not. So I've got something like that. You could continue using this if you like, using the lasso tool. It's quite useful. Oh, excuse me. It's quite useful for getting quick ideas. Oh dear, what's happened there? There we go. Let's take it back to that. Again, I'm just putting this bit of a kind of crack in there. So imagine this is kind of, kind of part of this split. You have to have a bit of a steady hand. Okay, now I'm just going to take the opacity down on that and just kind of put some of that in there. So again, I'm just putting this in here. I'm just sort of simulating this. That's all I'm doing, these little kind of cracks there. Oh dear, a little bit off, but anyway, I'm not going to get too fussed about that. Okay, and then within that, you can have these kind of structures, and they could be, they look kind of designed, So instead of using this kind of organic approach with the lasso tool, you could maybe use the polygonal tool or polygonal tool, or however you pronounce it, and you can have something like that, so you can have these kind of structures kind of coming out, futuristic kind of looking, and then sample that color. Where are you? There we go. So something like, go with a dark color first. Always kind of go dark and then go on with light. You'll get good results that way, because it serves as a kind of base. Might just increase the color on that. The opacity. Something like that. and just do a few runs through. So maybe do another structure there. Don't worry if it looks angular at the moment, you can kind of play around with it. And again, just kind of have that, a few pass-throughs on that. So try not to work when you're using either the brush or using the gradient tool. Try and kind of keep the opacity down. Try and stay away from having things at 100% all the time. You don't want to be working that way. Okay. So we've got something kind of going on there, and then and then if you want to, you can use the brush tool. Now I kind of tend to use brush 14. I don't know if you can see there. There we go. Brush 14. Very handy tool for smudge and for drawing. It's quite sort of naturalistic. And then again, using this as kind of reference, just looking at that and thinking, okay, well, just maybe even, let me just zoom in a little bit so you can see it. So you could have, use the smudge tool just to kind of sweep up. So imagine this is colossal. Just use your imagination and imagine that this is a colossal structure. So what's it all going to look like? Yeah. So again, you can just do what you want. I mean, you can use stuff like this as reference, but it's entirely up to you. How you do this. This is your world that you're creating, and yeah, for sure. I mean, look at some reference. From other artists, of course. You'd be inspired. All artists are inspired by other artists. Just use a bit of, so imagine like these structures will probably more than likely have let me find something like a bluish colour, something like that for the ice, and more than likely we'll have ice, snow that's fallen, which forms ice, which then settles on the top. Yeah, and who knows how how this might occur, but it'll probably settle on these like so. Maybe a little bit lighter on top. So just put a lighter blue on there, almost white. And then you just carry on. You just carry on working into it. Like I say, I didn't want to go into too much kind of detail with this, but all I really want to do is just take you through my process. So this would be part of it. It would go on from here. I'd be looking at. So what would be the next stages? So after looking at the reference, looking at colors, looking at environment, just thumbnails, arriving at ideas, because of course through the sketching, and here's the thing, I mean, when when you're doing things like thumbnails, one of the things that the areas that you want to be arriving at, sorry, change that over, one of the areas that you want to be arriving at is ideas. Okay, this is what it's all about. It doesn't, great ideas don't kind of go plop and they just arrive. You have to have a process. Yeah, this is where you get insight. There's something else that takes over, where when you're sketching, an idea will seep in and another idea will seep in. So even in the course of this video, I've gone from doing that to arriving at an idea of a subterranean subaquatic species which kind of live really under the water. Excuse me. And then that kind of led to, okay, so you got these structures kind of poking through the ice, but that was kind of partly inspired by this, you see. I like that, but I didn't realize it until I did the sketches, and then had the ideas, and then did that, then got to that, thought about that, and then went on to this, and then so on and so forth. Yeah, and that's how it works. And then from there, of course, you'd go on to, well, you'd do the sketches, you'd do more, obviously more polished kind of detailed concept art, and depending if you're the person who's going to do it or it's going to be passed on, you'd then be thinking about modeling it in Maya, and then going on to use whether it's Mudbox, Substance Painter, or Quixel Suite, and actually start doing all the texturing, doing the normals, and then after that importing them into say Unreal Engine, for example, and as FBX files, and going on from there. It's talking about as static meshes, yeah, and essentially this would be one way of creating your world. So again, I'm going to keep just over the course of these videos just really trying to emphasize more and more the process, yeah, of how I see it, and just I'm not saying I'm right about everything. These are just my observations, having worked in the film industry and talked to other content artists and things like that. These are the experiences that I'm kind of bringing through, and also talking to people from the games industry as well, and how they work and things like that. So this is another thing as well. It'd be a good idea if you haven't already, is try and talk to some of these people, make contacts with with companies, and particularly if you're a student, and try and find out about their work process, because eventually if you're a young person in your late teens, early 20s, or even if you're a mature student and you wanted to kind of break into either the film industry or into games, this is what you need to be doing. You need to be building up a body of work that when you're showing it to future employers, they can see that, yep, they know the process. We don't have to take time out to teach them this stuff. They know how to do it, and so on and so forth. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. So hopefully it's this video's been useful for you, and of course I'll be doing some more. So but yeah, I didn't get on to doing the life forms. Maybe I'll do another video. I'll do another video on that, but just for the time being, just to kind of get you up and running, this is at least hopefully get you off the ground and get you going. So yeah, so thanks for watching. Hope you've enjoyed it. If you have enjoyed it, be sure to give me a like. I am also on Patreon for anyone who's following me, so if you want to show a little bit of support, by all means, that would be much appreciated. Apart from that, that's it. Good luck with your drawing. I hope you have fun, and yeah, see you next time. Thanks a lot. Bye.